Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I am your host, Dylan Brewski, and it's not as busy as last week. We don't have, because there was no Bellator, and plus Bellator last week had two events. This week is just PFL and the UFC Fight Night, but I do want to dive right into it. In addition to UFC 274 predictions. As always, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Monday Night Fight Talk. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. Please like, please subscribe, please comment, do whatever you can. I'm trying to get my subscribers up here, so anything helps. Thank you guys so much for tuning in every week, but I'm going to dive right into it. I want to start off with PFL. That happened on Thursday, I believe. It was kind of overshadowed. We had the first round of the NFL draft. I know I actually had to go back and watch PFL at a later time because I was watching the NFL draft, but it was still a very, very exciting event. It was the heavyweights and featherweights in their first fights of this PFL 2022 season. I'm just going to go into a little detail on some of the fights and then give you guys a rankings update when it comes to the featherweights and the heavyweights. The first fight I want to talk about, though, Raynon Ferreira versus Boston Salmon. Raynon Ferreira outlasts Boston Salmon in a decision victory. This was a very, very exciting fight on the side of Raynon Ferreira. Salmon was very accurate, but not a lot of his strikes did a whole lot of damage to Raynon Ferreira. And it seemed like every time Ferreira hit Salmon, it hurt him, or it was at least a significant strike. Where Boston Salmon, like I said, he didn't really land a lot of those serious punishing strikes on Ferreira. And it worked in the favor of Raynon Ferreira. He was able to get the decision victory and pretty handily. Another fight I want to talk about, Klidson Abreu absolutely dominated the unorthodox Adam Koresh. It really goes to show that flashy doesn't really mean a whole lot when, one, you don't throw it a whole lot, and two, you aren't accurate when you do throw it. Koresh was throwing all sorts of kicks, all sorts of different weird strikes, trying to hit this back fist while standing to the side. It was really weird, but he didn't do a whole lot in this entire fight to really prove that he should win this fight. Abreu was absolutely dominant. He outstruck him by a long shot. He was able to get him to the ground and dominate him on the ground. As we know, Klidson Abreu, that's where he works his magic, is on the ground. And he was able to do that for this whole fight, was able to get the decision victory. Another fight I want to talk about, mostly just because of the knockout, because this fight was incredibly short. Raynon Ferreira gets a massive knockout on Jamel Jones before Jamel Jones even threw a punch. Jamel Jones, great wrestler, as we all know, tremendous wrestler. And he attempted one takedown, got kneed on the way in, and was knocked out. Before he even threw a strike, Raynon Ferreira, I want to say it was a flawless performance, but of course it was when he doesn't even let the guy get a single punch thrown. So that was a quick 6 points for Raynon Ferreira. He's now tied for first place in the heavyweight division. Next fight I want to talk about is mostly because I think this fight was very, very controversial. Brendan Loughnane got the technical decision versus Ryoji Kudo. This fight ended on an accidental clash of heads that left Kudo with a humongous cut on his forehead. The doctor ended up stopping this fight. If you have not seen this cut and you are a weak stomach person, I highly recommend you do not look at it because it's really, really bad. But it eventually led to, of course, a doctor stoppage It was late enough in the third round, though, that it did go to the judges' scorecards, and the third round was involved in the judges' scoring decision. The controversy does lie in the second round. So first round, Chito absolutely dominated. We all know that Chito won round one. Loughnane did come back in round 3 and clearly won round 3. There was no argument there. So again, it all came down to round 2. I thought Chito was the better fighter. He was more active. I thought just overall he had the better round. The judges didn't see it that way. They gave the veteran of PFL, Loughnane, the benefit of the doubt, it really seems like, and gave him the decision victory. He was able to capture 3 points in that. But very, very disappointing to see the fight end that way. You never want to see a fight end with a doctor stoppage, especially with an accidental clash of heads. Both guys just went down at the same time, knocked heads with each other, and it happens. That's what happens in the fight game. It happens every once in a while, but unfortunate events for Ryoji Chito, who could have come back and won that fight for all we know, but unfortunately was not able to do that. Next up, the co-main event of this event, Chris Wade gets a massive, massive decision victory over the 2-time featherweight champ, Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer did not really look that good in this fight. I don't know if he was dealing with an injury. I don't know what was happening, but I mean, he only attempted 56 strikes in a 15-minute fight. 56 in 15 minutes? That's not very active at all. He didn't really even try to wrestle with Chris Wade a whole lot, and that's where Lance Palmer that's where he wins his fights, is taking somebody to the ground and dominating them with his wrestling. He barely attempted takedowns. He barely threw strikes, where Chris Wade was active the entire fight. He threw 126 strikes, so he doubled and more of Lance Palmer's strikes. This was just a pure volume fight for Chris Wade, and he also did land the more significant strikes, I will admit. Sometimes when you see fights like this, you'll see the guy that threw less strikes ended up having the more powerful strikes, and that sometimes can get them the victory. But Lance Palmer didn't even throw that significant of strikes. So Chris Wade got a very, very big win for himself in this featherweight division against a former 2-time champ. So big, big props to Chris Wade in this fight. And then, of course, I got to talk about the main event, the reigning champion of the heavyweight division, Bruno Cappalosa, absolutely dominates Stuart Austin. You could tell in this fight. I mean, I don't want to judge somebody off of their looks, because obviously I don't even look like a fighter, but Stuart Austin did not look like he belonged in the octagon with Bruno Cappalosa. Bruno Cappalosa was better on the feet. He was better on the ground. This fight wasn't very long. It was a first-round finish, but it really didn't seem like Stuart Austin stood a chance against Bruno Cappalosa, and the champ was able to get the TKO victory with ground and pound, was able to get himself 6 points and tied for first, which brings me into the next segment. I'm going to give you a little rankings update. In the heavyweight division, there is a 3-way tie for first place. Bruno Cappalosa, the defending champ, like I just said. Raynon Ferreira, who I talked about a little bit earlier. And Denis Goltsov all got 6 points with first-round finishes. Ante De La Hoya, he was able to get a second-round finish, so he was able to get 5 points. And then Klidson Abreu was able to get a decision victory, which got him 3 points and just outside of the playoffs. But there is still another fight for him to make up a little bit of ground. And then Karish, Scheffel, Austin, Goodell, and Jones all have 0 as they all lost. And then in featherweight, there was no finishes. It was all decision victories, so there's actually a 5-way tie for first. and then the rest of the people that lost all have 0. So Shaman Marias, Flores, Chris Wade, Bubba Jenkins, Brendan Loughnane all have 3 points. Ryoji Kudo, Bochniak, Palmer, Balage, and Salmon all with 0. Next week will be the welterweights and the women's lightweights. I believe that is on Friday, May 6th, with Kayla Harrison, the defending women's lightweight champion, coming in as the main event of that one. But that's enough PFL talk for right now. I want to get into this UFC fight night that happened 2 nights ago, headlined by Rob Font versus Chito Vera. And while that was such an exciting fight, and I cannot wait to talk about it, I am going to go from the beginning of that card and work my way towards the main event of that one. So stay tuned for that. But first off, Shayna Young turned the tables and gets the TKO victory over Gina Mazzani. Going into this fight, I thought Shayna Young had the advantage on the feet, which she did. It's plain and simple as that. She was winning on the feet. And I thought Gina Mazzani would have the advantage on the ground. That's where I was wrong. Shayna Young looked amazing on the feet, and Gina Mazzani ended up trying to get a takedown twice, and both times Shayna Young was able to reverse it and get on top. The second one ended up being the last little bit of action we saw as Shayna Young got in a dominant position and just started raining blows down on Gina Mazzani. Ended up getting a second round TKO victory. Huge win for Shayna Young. And then the next fight, Natan Levy has a absolutely tremendous performance and victory over Mike Breeden. This fight was awesome. Both fighters were really active on the feet and active on the ground. There was 12 total takedowns in this fight. Both fighters landed just about 100 strikes each. In the end, Levy had the constant pressure. He landed 9 of those 12 takedowns and landed the bigger strikes on the feet and was able to get the decision victory. Absolutely phenomenal performance by both, but especially Natan Levy. That was a big win for him. The next fight was Gabriel Greene getting the comeback victory over Lohan Lanesi. This fight was crazy. From start to finish, Lanesi 100% won the first round. He dropped Greene. He was the more active fighter. He looked phenomenal in that first round. And you could even say that he was winning the second round. But when it came to the second round, Gabriel Greene did look far more comfortable in that second round. He looked like he really settled in for that second round and was able to land a huge blow and get the TKO victory in a comeback in a fight that he was most likely losing. Arguably, if it would have gone to the third round, he would have been down 2-0, but was able to come back and get the huge victory in a comeback fight. He was out for a while. He had some vision issues where he ended up having to have surgery to fix his vision. He had no depth perception or something like that. But this was a huge win in his comeback with a comeback victory for Gabriel Greene. I'm going to talk about 2 fights basically at once because they happened back-to-back. They were both very dominant fights. Francisco Figueiredo and Alexander Romanov absolutely dominated their 2 opponents. There's really nothing else to say. Figueiredo was able to get a really quick knee bar submission. Romanov was able to land some huge strikes in the mounted position and get the TKO victory. I wish there was more to say about these fights, but that's really all that happened. So I'm just going to move on from those 2. Krzysztof Jotko in the first main card fight of the night gets a huge win over the veteran Gerald Meerschaert. It was almost an impeccable performance by Jotko. The broadcasters were talking about how it really seemed that Jotko was a step ahead in both the stand-up and the ground game. And there is not a lot of people that you can say were a step ahead of Gerald Meerschaert on the ground. Gerald Meerschaert is a veteran of this game. He is a jiu-jitsu master. He is unbelievable on the ground, on his back, on top. It does not matter. On the ground, Gerald Meerschaert, that is his world. And Jotko beat him on the ground and in the stand-up. It was absolutely dominant, and it was a huge win after coming off a loss against Sean Strickland. This definitely brings Jotko back up, because, I mean, you're not going to fault somebody for losing to Sean Strickland lately, because Sean Strickland has been on an absolute tear and is now a top 5 middleweight in the world. So it is big for Jotko to come back on the winning end of things. And then the next fight was Darren Elkins getting the decision victory over Tristan Connolly. This was basically the toughness and well-roundedness of Darren Elkins. It was a little bit like the last fight, where Tristan Connolly is a jiu-jitsu specialist, and Darren Elkins beat him on the feet and beat him on the ground. Darren Elkins is a freaking workhorse. That dude never stops. He has constant pressure over and over and over again. He's in your face at all times. And it didn't even scare Elkins. He attempted the takedowns. Tristan Connolly didn't even attempt a takedown. Darren Elkins had 5 takedowns in this fight against a jiu-jitsu specialist and was able to win the fight. Absolutely great performance by Darren Elkins. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. The veteran, he's kind of getting back on the winning side of things. I wouldn't be surprised to see a ranked opponent in his future in the next 1 or 2 fights that he has. If he decides to keep going with this, like I said, he is a veteran. But if he decides to keep going, I wouldn't be surprised to see a ranked opponent in his near future. Next up, Grant Dawson has a tremendous performance with a submission victory over Jared Gordon. This was a really good fight, actually. I wouldn't say it was incredibly close, but Dawson did dominate on the ground. At the same time, Gordon was winning that fight when it was on the feet. The only problem, it wasn't on the feet a whole lot, as Grant Dawson had 7 takedowns in this fight. Eventually, with under a minute left in the 3rd round, he was finally able to sink in the rear naked choke, get the submission victory. And just like Darren Elkins, I would not be shocked to see either a ranking or a ranked opponent up next for Grant Dawson. This guy is 18-1-1 and has been dominant since he's joined the UFC. I think it's time to give him that ranked opponent. If not, put him in the rankings at like 15. Give him something. He deserves it. He's been a workhorse since he's joined the UFC. And like I said, he's been absolutely dominant since he's joined the UFC. So give that man the things he deserves. Next up, Joe Anderson Brito makes very, very quick work of Andre Fili. That's about it. This was a 41-second fight. Joe Anderson landed a huge strike and was able to get the KO victory. Kind of like the Romanov and Figueiredo fights. That's really all I have for this, because there was not much else that happened in this fight. Co-main event, though. This is where it gets controversial. Andrei Arlovski gets a very, very controversial split decision victory over Jake Collier. And before I get into this controversy, I got to take a second to apologize to Jacob Collier. Wow. I thought he was going to get dominated in this fight. I believe my prediction was first round TKO for Andrei Arlovski. Jake Collier was phenomenal in this fight. I personally think Jake Collier won this fight. I fully believe that Jake Collier not only won this fight, he won every single round in this fight. But at the end of the day, Arlovsky won it over for two of the judges. But again, Jake Collier outstruck in total strikes and significant strikes Arlovsky. He got 2 takedowns in this fight, and he loses? The way I thought Collier won that fight, and I wouldn't say dominantly. It was a very close fight, but I thought it was pretty clear that Jake Collier won this fight. I think Arlovsky might have gotten the benefit of the doubt, being the name that he is, being the former heavyweight champion, having all the wins in the UFC that he has. No disrespect to Andrei Arlovsky. He's a legend of this game, a future UFC Hall of Famer, no doubt. But I think Jake Collier personally won this fight. But it was a great fight nonetheless. It sucks that it had to end in such a controversial decision, but nonetheless, great fight. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leads into the main event of the evening. Marlon Chito Vera gets a humongous decision victory over Rob Font. This fight was absolutely insane. All I can really say about this fight is wow. It was unbelievable how good this fight was. These two went to absolute war over 5 rounds in the UFC. I say that, but honestly, if you look at Chito Vera's face, it doesn't look like he got hit at all. It looked like he had a walk in the park with his kids. But Rob Font threw over 500 strikes, and he landed 273 of those strikes on Chito Vera, and it didn't even look like Chito Vera got hit. It was absolutely unbelievable showcase, really by both, but especially Chito Vera, who, yeah, he didn't land anywhere near as many strikes, but every single strike that he landed meant something. Rob Font's face was messed up at the end of that fight. He looked like he got punched in the face 1,000 times. But Chito Vera was absolutely phenomenal. Every strike that he landed seemed to pretty much hurt Rob Font. He had 3 official knockdowns in this fight. One in the second, one in the third, one in the fourth. You could argue even in the 5th round that he almost had a knockdown. It was more Rob Font got stunned, but Rob Font never went to the ground, so I guess they didn't officially consider that one a knockdown. But still, I mean, to stun a guy like that 4 times in one fight, a top 5 contender in a humongously stacked weight class. The Bantamweight is the deepest weight class in the UFC right now, and Chito Vera just got a top 5 win. Absolutely huge props to Chito Vera. Afterwards, they asked him who he would like to see. He said anyone ranked 2 through 4. 2, 3, or 4. That's TJ Dillashaw at number 2. That's Jose Aldo at number 3. And that's Corey Sandhagen at number 4. I'm going to eliminate Jose Aldo. I don't see Jose Aldo taking a fight, especially against someone ranked lower than him at the moment. I think that Jose Aldo really wants a title shot, so I could really only see Jose Aldo accepting 2 fights, to be honest, and that's either Petr Yan, the former champ, the number 1 contender, or Aljamain Sterling for the Bantamweight Championship. Other than that, I don't really see Jose Aldo taking a different fight, but honestly, I could see, even though he's ranked higher, I could see TJ Dillashaw being more likely just because he had the suspension. He had like 2 years of inactivity. He came back, had the big win over Corey Sandhagen. but he does kind of need more than just that win to be in the title picture. So I could definitely see Chito Vera versus TJ Dillashaw. Corey Sandhagen obviously needs to bounce back, coming off of 2 straight losses, granted to the number 1 and number 2 contender in this weight class in TJ Dillashaw and Petr Yan. But he does need a big win, and Chito Vera would be that big win because I do expect Chito Vera to most likely be the number 5 contender now, basically jump everybody and then jump Rob Font also in front of him. If not, maybe 6, but I fully expect after that performance, he's got to be the number 5 contender in the bantamweight division. So I would love either TJ Dillashaw or Corey Sandhagen. I gotta be honest, I don't really have a preference. I think either fight would be phenomenal with Chito Vera. But that's enough about what has already taken place. Let's do some UFC 274 fight predictions. Starting off with Blagoy Ivanov versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima. This is couple hard-hitting heavyweights, big boys going at each other. Blagoy Ivanov has been on a bit of a skid lately, dropping his last 2 fights, though he still is the number 15th ranked heavyweight in the world right now, where Marcos Rogerio de Lima is on a 2-fight winning streak, looking to extend that to 3 and get a win over a ranked opponent. That might put him in the ranking conversation. There are a few others, including Alexander Romanov, who just fought this last week and absolutely dominated. So you never know. He could, Marcos Rogerio de Lima might be in that conversation. He might not. Nonetheless, I think that really the momentum is on the side of de Lima right now. Like I said, Ivanov is on a 2-fight losing skid, and he does not look tremendous lately. So I am going to go with de Lima in this fight. I do have him extending his win streak to 3. Next up, we're going all the way from the big old heavyweights at 265, all the way down to the flyweight division, 125. Top 10 matchup here. Number 6, Brandon Royval versus number 9, Matt Schnell. This fight has huge implications for the flyweight division. This division is not the deepest. It's actually there's like an upper echelon with the champ Davidson Figueiredo, the former champ Brandon Moreno. Kai Kara Francis put his name in there now after being Askar Askarov. I do believe Askar Askarov is still in that conversation. Alexander Pantoja. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of guys that are fighting for, or even close to fighting for, a championship. So this is a big fight for both of these guys. Both guys are coming off fights against Rogerio Bontorin. Royval was able to get the split decision victory over Bontorin, where Matt Schnell did end up losing. But I think that the styles are going to be a little bit different in this fight for each other. Royval is very much a counter fighter. He waits for openings. He's not incredibly aggressive. Matt Schnell is a very aggressive jiu-jitsu fighter. I think that the jiu-jitsu and the aggressiveness of Matt Schnell is going to play big into this fight. I have Schnell winning this fight, getting it to the ground quite frequently, but eventually in the 3rd round, I have him winning by submission. Next up, Macy Chiasson versus Norma Dumont. This is a very interesting bout. 2 ranked bantamweights moving up to the featherweight division. Norma Dumont is coming off the biggest win of her young UFC career against Aspen Ladd, who is a top 10 bantamweight. Granted, Aspen Ladd did take this fight on very, very short notice. I believe it was under a week last year, but it doesn't really matter. Getting a win over a top 10 opponent is always big, especially for a young fighter like Norma Dumont. Macy Chiasson, on the other hand, is coming off of a loss versus Raquel Pennington, who is a top 5 bantamweight, so not going to hold too much against her in this fight. But both fighters are they're well-rounded, but they do prefer to go on the ground. Macy Chiasson does have a 4-inch height advantage and a 5-inch reach advantage. So I do see her maybe trying to keep it on the feet a little bit more, use that range to her advantage. But what Norma Dumont lacks in height versus Macy, she does make up in power. She is a very powerful woman, and I cannot wait to see her in action versus Macy Chiasson. I have Norma Dumont winning this fight. I think she's going to overpower Macy. I have Norma winning by decision. Next up, we have the premier prelim, Randy Brown versus Chaos Williams. This is going to be an absolute banger of a welterweight bout. Randy Brown is a great wrestler. He has great jiu-jitsu. He has great ground and pound. The ground is his world. Chaos Williams is a one-punch knockout type of guy, a tremendous striker with insane power. I say he's a one-punch knockout guy, but he can go the distance too. Chaos Williams, he does have 3 wins by knockout about a minute long. 130 seconds, 140 seconds, one just over a minute, like a minute 2 or something like that. But he also has decision victories, so it's not like he's just one flurry and then he's burnt out for the rest of the fight. No, he can go a full 15 minutes. In this fight, I do see Randy Brown being a little cautious at first, and that might be the smart thing to do, to be honest, with Chaos Williams' power. But I do see him kind of taking a step back, not immediately going for the takedown and getting caught with something. But I do believe Chaos Williams is going to win this fight, and I do believe it's still going to be by first round TKO. And that leads to the main card. Starting off the main card, we have 2 little bit of a throwback bouts coming up. Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon. Donald Cerrone making his 38th UFC appearance, which will tie him for second all-time, tying with Andrei Arlovsky, who just was in the co-main event of the last fight night, and one behind Jim Miller, who fought about a month ago. Joe Lauzon, on the other hand, has not been active at all recently. He hasn't fought in the UFC since 2019, and he was on quite the losing streak. I believe it was 4 in a row he had lost before he went inactive in the UFC. I think that inactivity plus the losing streak that he's coming off of when he was active, I think that's going to hurt Joe Lauzon in the long run for this fight. I have Donald Cerrone winning this fight, and this would be a big win for Donald Cerrone because then he can reclaim the sole UFC win king. Right now he is tied with those 2, Jim Miller and Andrei Arlovsky. I think he surpasses them, getting his 24th UFC victory. Next up, the second of the throwback fights, Mauricio Shogun Rua, the former light heavyweight champion, takes on Ovince St. Preux. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little worried about how active this fight's going to be. It's going to be fun. It's going to be nostalgic seeing these two in the octagon. Like I said, former champion Mauricio Shogun Rua, former title contender Ovince St. Preux. He never held the title, but he was in the discussion. He was top 10, top 5 light heavyweight in his heyday. But frankly, I'm just not sure how active these guys are going to be. I'm not sure how quote-unquote exciting this fight's going to be. But ultimately, I am going to go with the guy that has been more active recently. Shogun hasn't fought since 2020. Ovince St. Preux fought last year at the heavyweight division, but he's going back down to light heavyweight. I have St. Preux winning this fight, also by decision. Next up is where we get into the meat and potatoes of UFC 274. I am so excited for what is about to go down in these last three fights. Starting off with Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. This fight is going to be absolutely insane. Neither guy has had the most success recently, but they've faced the best lightweights in the world. And so Michael Chandler's had 3 fights in the UFC. He's 1-2. He's beat Dan Hooker, who is also on a losing skid, but he's also facing some of the best people at their weight classes in the world. And then he's coming off the 2 straight losses. One to the current champ for the UFC lightweight champion, Charles Oliveira, and the other one to Justin Gaethje, who's challenging for the title all that night. Tony Ferguson, also on a bit of a losing skid, also lost to Charles Oliveira. He lost to Beneil Dariush, a top 5 lightweight contender. So, again, these guys are facing top competition. They're not getting the job done, but these are the best fighters in the world. Chandler is a great wrestler with unbelievable punching power, but I don't know how much the wrestling is going to work to his advantage because Tony Ferguson is a jiu-jitsu master and he almost thrives being off of his back. He is tremendous off his back. He can get you in a number of submissions from the back. Plus, he is an above-average striker also, just like Chandler. Ultimately, I do feel Tony Ferguson has lost a little bit of a step. His losses were a little bit more worrisome when it comes to how bad he was kind of dominated in those fights, where Michael Chandler he had great performances, but just came up short. Ultimately, I don't think either one's going to finish the other because both of these guys are just tough as nails. But I do think Michael Chandler wins a very ugly, very exciting bout and improves a 2-2 in the UFC. Next up, our first of 2 title fights going on at UFC 274. A rematch of the inaugural strawweight championship. Rose Namajunas, the champion currently, versus Carla Esparza, the former champion. Like I said, this is a rematch of the inaugural championship way back in 2014, so 8 years ago. Carla Esparza was able to come out on top in that bout, but a whole lot has changed since 2014. Carla is a tremendous grappler. She is an unbelievable grappler. She has the advantage in grappling in this bout. Rose, back in 2014, was also a grappler. She focused mostly on grappling and jiu-jitsu and all that. She is now transitioned into more of a striker, and she is incredible with her striking. She is unbelievable at striking at this point in her career. She's beat some of the best in the world. So is Carla Esparza, but Thug Rose's resume, I would say, is a bit better than Carla's. That's no disrespect to Carla, but I mean, Rose Namajunas has knockout victories over Yang Wei Li, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She has a decision victory over Jessica Andrade. Literally the best fighters this division has to offer. Thug Rose has probably beat every single one of them. But like I said, Carla is a great grappler, but to Rose's advantage, like I said, she used to be a grappler, so she can hold her own. Carla does have the advantage on the ground, but Rose knows what to do. She's not completely lost when she's on the ground. She can get back up. I think she will. I think Rose wins this fight by second round TKO, retaining her title. And now for the main event of the evening. Charles Oliveira, the lightweight champion, defends his belt versus Justin Gaethje, the number 1 contender. This is going to be awesome. I cannot wait for this bout. Justin Gaethje might be the hardest hitting lightweight on the planet. Not only does he hit incredibly hard, he is incredibly accurate. He is so precise with his strikes, where Charles Oliveira is a jiu-jitsu master. If he gets you on the ground, you are in serious trouble with Charles Oliveira. He can get you in any sort of submission from any sort of position, it really seems like. As we know, Justin Gaethje's not that great on the ground. It would be at a huge disadvantage on the ground. We saw it in the Khabib fight. I feel like we've seen it in other fights, but mostly what comes to mind is the Khabib fight, where Khabib just dominated him on the ground. And while obviously Khabib might be the greatest wrestler, or one of the greatest wrestlers in the lightweight division, Charles Oliveira is no slouch on the ground. He is unbelievable. He has beat the best fighters on the planet. He has beat Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson. You name it, this guy has beat them. Justin Gaethje has beat Michael Chandler, yes. He's beat some of the best fighters in the world, but he's at a huge disadvantage when it comes to the ground game, and he's not the greatest at takedown defense. I think Charles gets this fight to the ground, and I think he wins this fight, retaining his title by third round submission. But that is all I have for you this week. Thank you all so much for listening. Please tune in next week, same time, Monday at 5 p.m. I will be going over the last round 1 week of PFL, the women's lightweight and the men's welterweights going at it, headlined by Kayla Harrison, trying to defend her title again, going against, I am blanking on who she's going against right now, but also I'm going to be reacting to Bellator 280, headline with the heavyweight championship being on the line. Ryan Bader, the current champion, takes on Czech Congo. Also, my UFC 274 reaction, and I will also be giving my UFC Fight Night, headlined by Jan Blachowicz, the former champ, number 1 contender, versus the up-and-comer Alexander Rakic, number 3 contender in the light heavyweight division. I'll be giving my predictions for that fight night coming up on May 14th. I'm very excited to be back with you guys next week. But for now, that is it for me this week. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you on YouTube, same time, same place, at Monday Night Fight Talk on Instagram, at MN Fight Talk on Twitter. Please like, subscribe, follow, whatever you can do. I am trying to get my numbers up. Thank you all so much for listening again.